Hello, and welcome to VERITAS, where truth and mission come together for the glory of God. I'd like to thank our guest today, Alan Napleton, for joining us. Alan is actively involved in promoting the Catholic faith through connecting small Catholic bookstores with the publishers and producers of material. But I understand that you also have a faith journey that you went through.
That's right.
You're originally from Western Pennsylvania?
That's right, for a little town north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania.
A large family, small family?
There were 7 of us, 5 sisters and a brother. So
So they're just the 2 boys?
Just the 2 boys. We had 4 girls, and my dad was happy when I came along there. But yes.
We won't go into that. That'll only get us into trouble.
Okay.
So so you grew up there in an active Catholic family?
I would say yes in the circumstances. The Western Pennsylvania is coal mining steel.
Right.
And especially that was the case decades ago. My grandfather spent 47 years, if you can believe that, in a Western Pennsylvania coal mine. All of my grandparents were immigrants either from Italy, France, or Germany. And so we knew how to work, in a sense, but everyone was hardworking, but when you grew up in that environment and such, you were trying to do better. I mean, my grandfather worked that hard so that I could go to college, you know, wear a tie and such. So my father was a hard worker, and that was really what you did. But it was, I remember going to the devotions and, you know, the retreats. We had a beautiful little elementary school, and it was nuns. All the nuns were teaching there. So for 8 years I went to St. Paul Catholic School there, and I often laugh because you know, you have the comedians talk about the nuns with the ruler, but I had a very wonderful experience there. I remember even as a child thinking, you know, these sisters love us.
Really?
Yeah.
And you always hear such horrible things about the nuns, so it's always good.
I didn't experience that.
Right.
You know,
and I think actually most people didn't.
Yep.
It's just that there were a few exceptions, and
Yes.
people make a big deal out of the
And you did what you were told.
Right.
That was.
But everybody did what they were told back then.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, it's funny, Fred, because in what I do now in the last few decades, I interface with religious a lot. Mm-hmm. And when I love the sisters. You know, we were visiting with the Daughters of St. Paul earlier, but I was talking to Mother Superior, one of the orders, and I said, you know, Mother, when I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm back to being 9 or 10 years old. I said, please don't ask me to go up and jump off the roof, because I would do it. Sister says this, you don't ask any questions. You do what Sister says.
It was a very different world. Nowadays that doesn't happen. So you grew up, you had a pretty active Catholic upbringing.
Yeah, I would say so, yes.
And then you went off to college.
Went off to college.
And you stayed active in your faith?
No. No, that's I did not. I like a lot of students that age and such, and I wasn't catechized. I was involved in the cultural. You know, we had a beautiful statue of our Blessed Mother, and but I didn't really know anything, and it was only elementary school and such. And it was a small town. We had a modest. It was a modest family income and such. So in college I worked. I was ran the dorm for my room there, and I worked in cafeteria for food, but I did very well in school, mainly because I was paying for it myself, and I had worked 2 years prior to that, kind of in a blue collar environment. I thought, you know, I don't need to go to college. I got it figured out, and I didn't. So I thought, well, and so I was a little bit older when I went into school, and so I really cracked the grades there because I didn't find it that difficult, and it was really a business. I wanted a practical degree, which is. You know, I talked to my own son or my niece. I said, you know, get a liberal arts education. That's a real education. You know, you don't want to take human resources. I mean, that's what I did. I took them from professors. The college really did a great job bringing in senior executives in that field. So I didn't have any trouble getting a job when I left. And I wasn't the biggest sinner on campus, but I also wasn't going to church, and I was sinning. I didn't realize it was sin and such, but I was, you know, getting out of that little town environment,
right.
realizing you could compete. You didn't really know until you either compete academically, and then when I went into the corporate world, I thought, I can compete. First of all, I had that, no one's going to outwork me.
Yeah.
And I never had a job I didn't love. So it's the old saying, when you have a job that you love, when are you really working?
So you went into human resources?
No, but I mean, those are the type of courses you took at school. You didn't read the great books.
Right.
You took those types of courses. So it was a bachelor's degree in business administration.
Did you have a focus, a specialty?
On management and a minor in accounting.
Okay.
So it was a good degree, a good business degree, good degree to get a job.
And so you went out and got a job,
right away.
And you returned to your faith right away, right?
No.
No?
Here was another. I have a serious case of wanderlust. And so, in fact, my first job, this was in the 70s, gas lines were going on and such, and Westinghouse, which has their headquarters there, offered me a job. Mm-hmm. And I didn't take it because I didn't want to live in that area. It wasn't the job or something. I really wanted out to experience some things. And so I did get a job. My first job was, I was with Amtrak. Amtrak was just starting up. It was going to be, well, first of all, I answered an ad in the Wall Street Journal, and you had to be available to relocate.
And you thought, that's me.
That's me. Funny story, but I won't go into that story. But I ended up, I went down to LaFont Plaza. I think that's where they're still headquartered there. And that was when we were going to finally build a rail system. It was a quasi-government. You had some of the airlines people running it, some of the military running it. It was just getting started. And I realized, quite frankly, that it wasn't going to go anywhere, even back then. And even though I liked it, you got to ride the trains. You got to go up and I remember being up in the engine. We were being trained as the future executives.
Right.
So I liked it, but I also realized, even though it was quasi-government, the government part wasn't for me. It wasn't the competitive part. There were people there that they had a secure job and that was enough. Well, I had some ambition. So then I got a job with Ford Motor Company, but it brought me around to different cities. I began to live in different cities. I got a job with Ford Motor Company as a financial analyst, and I didn't care for that much because back then, all information flowed from the top down. I can remember back then we were just going from 8 tracks to cassettes. And we dealt with, when you deal with car dealers, this is a group of interesting people that run car dealerships. And we were being trained. You scheduled the cars to be built. You were talking to them, and the dealers would say, "Could you tell those folks up in Detroit to quit putting 8-track? They're driving around listening to Perry Como with the 8 tracks." We on our 20s, we all knew cassettes were what's happening.
Right.
So they had to yank them out of there. But the information wasn't flowing there. If I wanted to offer a suggestion, you didn't do that. You worked hard. I learned a lot there, though, because you had 16 hours of work. Well, you worked long hours. Maybe you worked 12-hour days, and so you had to figure out what 4 hours of work wasn't going to get done. That was good. That was good training, and it was like that from the moment you went in. And because you were being trained ahead to Dearborn.
Yeah.
But then I landed the job that I really liked, which was this was a developer that was building apartment complexes, office parks, kind of the tilt wall stuff, a few office buildings, but he was a real innovator. If you look at an apartment complex nowadays that has swimming pools and activity rooms, it's pretty blasé in a sense, but you think, who built the first one? Well, it was Howard Ruby back in Southern California. In the 50s, they didn't have those. Right. It was a lifestyle. So he was a really good marketing guy who happened to build things. So he came up with that concept. And so I went to work. That concept was already, when I got on board, you can see in Newsweek magazine, they talked about it. He had another concept. And so it was a really marketing company. Even though it was one of the largest real estate, still are one of the largest real estate developments, it was a marketing company. Howard was really always thinking. And so I liked that job a lot. Meanwhile, I'm making more and more money. I realized I can compete. Now I'm in a job I really, really like. So I started as an asset manager. I ended up, 15 years later as their business development person, which I found I had a knack for too. And during that period of time, spiritually, there was no spiritual life. I was realizing I don't know how far this is going to go because I'm competing and winning. I'm not, you're not going to read about me in the Wall Street Journal, but I can definitely compete and make a very good living. And I've already, could buy anything I wanted if you were experienced. So I was experiencing everything the world had to offer, and enjoying what I was doing. But then I had a dramatic experience that changed everything, and it happened in a nanosecond.
So what was that?
Well, it goes back to this grade school. I didn't realize it at the time. But when I was 9 years old, one of the good sisters told us the story of Fatima. I didn't realize I was a recipient of a huge grace. Fatima is a story made for children. She appeared to children. There's a secret. And I was spellbound. I remember when I heard that story, and I can tell you, Fred, that 1960, that was when the Pope was supposed to open up the letter. So our school was probably like a lot of typical Catholic schools at the time. You came in, you said the Pledge of Allegiance, you did your prayers. Monsignor Spiegel came over the
loudspeaker.
And so I thought during Christmas, and I was an introverted child.
I can see that. I can see that.
Well, yeah, in the sense that I didn't say this to anybody.
Yeah.
And it's a big family, so there's chaos. It's not like my 6 siblings were interested in. And plus, I didn't know what I had experienced was different, that it really affected me, so that I couldn't wait. I didn't care about Christmas. I couldn't wait until we got back, because in that little mind of mine, I thought I would come in, say the Pledge of Allegiance, say the prayers, and he would tell us the secret. I mean, so it seemed like a big deal to me.
Right.
The sky opened up. I realized that, we didn't have sci-fi, but we had the real sci-fi.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew this really happened. The dimensions had split, and the cameras were rolling. 80,000 people saw it.
Right.
Non-believers saw it. It happened. I can remember. Anyways, so no secret comes in. One senior talked about what we were having for lunch or something. I had no idea.
Right.
So I thought, Portugal, I'm not quite sure where that is. Maybe it takes a while to get the secret over here. And I remember, but then here's what happened. A week turned into a month, turned into a year, turned into decades. So if you then fast forward, I'm in my mid-30s now. And I'm in my mid-30s, and at that time I wasn't, at that time, part of my responsibilities were looking after some of these assets. So I had to visit.
Looking up some of the assets.
Looking after some of these assets.
The real estate.
The real estate.
Right.
So we had an office building in Houston, Texas. And so, an office building, that's worth some dollars. You have a property manager on site. You look at the books. You look what's going on. You're representing the owners.
Right.
Now, in this particular case, the woman that ran the building was phenomenal at her job. And I had been doing this every year, coming by and doing my visit. So I knew the asset was solid. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when the boss showed up, it brought out the worst in her. She was very nervous. She wasn't herself. She wasn't this great, she was nervous for some reason. So we're sitting there at the table, we're going over this stuff, and I'm really not paying that much attention because I already had looked at it the night before, and I knew she was doing a great job. And I knew also she was nervous. So, we're looking at the numbers, and I look over, there's a little pamphlet right there, a little trifold pamphlet. It's on Fatima. So I looked at that, and of course that caught my attention. I knew what it was immediately.
Well, you weren't listening to the presentation, so.
Yeah, you're right. I was looking around the room, Well, no, but it was right there on the table.
Right.
So I picked it up, and I looked at her, I said, whose is this? Is this yours? Well, that only made her nervous, more nervous. So, oh, you can have it, because she could see I was interested. And I said, well, I was curious how it got there. It's not something, She never really told me. After asking a couple times, I thought, okay, I just put, it didn't seem, as I put it in my pocket and went through the rest of the day. And then when I went back, I go back to the hotel, and then I open it up, and it was like, I always can relate to the scripture where Paul was on the road to Emmaus, and he says, and like scales fell away.
Right.
It wasn't quite like that, but it was kind of like that. My whole life just changed.
Really?
It was as if I was 9 years old again, and mature enough to realize, wait a minute, the dimensions did change. It wasn't that the sisters had told me this.
All of a sudden you went from a childish understanding to an adult understanding.
But both knowing it was true.
Yes.
That it was very, very true.
Right.
And I was also infused with, you're a child of God. Now, I did not know anything about my Catholic faith. All I knew was I wasn't living like a child of God. So I lost all interest immediately in everything that I only had an interest in a nanosecond earlier. So that set into motion really a period of time, a year and a half or so, I would say, because at the time, the job I had, we were looking to have a footprint in Chicago. So Howard Ruby is still alive. That he said, Al, we'd like to get we'd like to do a deal in Chicago. Well, in business development, that meant I went up. I got an apartment in Chicago, and I started finding out what was going on in the real estate world. My job basically was to put the right people in the room.
Right.
And I did in that job. In fact, so what happened was, once that happens, you have to define. It's a complex. It was a 30-story high-rise apartment building, right at 66 West Warren, right was near the cathedral, which was interesting too, because in the early construction there was an apartment ready, so I was living in the building there even while it was being finished out. Mm-hmm. And I went over and went to confession. It was the first time in a long time, and in the confessional, wasn't so much the sin, but I think the priest sensed that I was trying to figure. He invited me to come over to the rectory, and so we developed a friendship. And he encouraged me. He says, "Well, why don't you try to bring Jesus into the boardroom?" And so I did try that. But now here was Al, who used to be the hardest working and kind of the hardest partier. He could do both. Mm-hmm. Suddenly wanted to talk about the Lord. Well, even though it was funny because I'm in my mid-30s, which seems now that I'm in my mid-60s, they thought I was going through a midlife crisis. It's true. I mean, because these guys and women that we had worked with, one was getting a Harley, one was getting a tattoo, one was getting a new wife, one was getting a sports car, and Napleton's getting religion.
You're finding Jesus.
This too will pass. That was, so they, I thought, oh, this is tough. Well, and then there was another element too. I thought about this, okay, I happen to have been born into a Catholic family. I wonder if I'd have been born into a Baptist family, or for that matter, a Muslim family or a Hindu family. So I started to read. And what convinced me was that Christ led the only life that was ever preordained. Nobody was expecting Muhammad. Nobody was expecting Buddha. But for 2,000 years, how he would live, where he would be born, how he would die, what he would teach, what he would do. Some of it revealed through the life of Christ. That set Jesus Christ apart. To me, I thought, okay, I'm Christian for sure. I'm not following somebody that nobody was expecting.
Right.
Everybody has the right to be heard. I could come in here and say, you know what, our Blessed Mother appeared to me, but what authority? So God understands us. For 2,000 years, we were preparing this. Right. So I thought, I'm definitely a Christian. Well, then I began to study. I thought, well, Christ lived 2,000 years ago, so I was interested in the history of the church. Well, if you take an honest look at the Catholic Church with its saints and sinners and really look at the history, you're going to become Catholic. Taken as a whole, it founded the university system. It educated the people. And then, again, I knew that it was being under attack more viciously than any other Christian church, or any church for that matter. So I thought, that makes sense. Christ said, the world hates me. So I thought, there's a big old bullseye. So I thought, I like who's attacking the church. Looking at it, I thought it just made sense. And then seeing the history of it, you'd say, well, no new sins. The history kind of changes, and it was an easy decision. Even though I had evangelical friends, and I still do, and I don't say there's any false humility rather. I wish I loved the Lord as some of my evangelical friends,
right.
But they don't have the fullness of the truth. They don't have and it really came down to the Eucharist too.
Which is kind of interesting because that's the Scott Hahn story. Have you heard Scott Hahn's story about that he started out, he was going to disprove the Catholic Church, and so he started reading the Church Fathers, and he was thinking that all the Church Fathers would show how wrong the Church was, and he'd read something and he'd wait, that's Catholic. He'd read something else and wait, that's Catholic. And eventually, through studying the history of the Church, he came into the Church. So you're right. If you look at the history, going back to, St. Ignatius of Antioch and Justin Martyr and a number of those saints, it's all the same church. It's not like we've changed, and it's the one true holy Catholic Church. So, but if people take the time to look at it,
if you look at it honestly,
yes,
not through any kind of rose-colored lens, I'm talking about an honest look at it, you're going to become Catholic. I have evangelical friends that I like a lot, and it's hard. If if your daddy was a preacher and your granddaddy was a preacher and you've been around and you're living the 10 Commandments,
right? But
I often say, tongue in cheek, I say, do not, under any circumstances, read the early church fathers. I said, don't do it,
right? Because
that's going to upset your life. Because you're going to become Catholic, and I've watched what that happens. So do not look at history. Pretend it all began 500 years ago, or whatever your church is. Bible floated down from heaven. Pretend that. Go through the, there was persecution. The whole.
Right.
But it's a very simplistic misrepresentation. Very simplistic.
I grew up in Texas, and this isn't about me, I know, but I grew up in Texas surrounded by, at the time we called them fundamentalists, but now they'd be termed evangelicals.
Yes.
And I was the only Catholic in my grade at school, and the next closest Catholic was my brother, who was 2 years older. And my best friend in school was Jimmy, a little Jewish boy, because both of us, we weren't going to heaven. And they told us that many times. And so Jimmy and I, we had a great time.
But that's hard as a young, because you want to belong.
Right.
And that's
and we were ostracized until we got into high school, and then all the girls decided they wanted to convert me. So I got a lot of dates that way. But we don't need to go into that. That's
one angle I hadn't thought of. I thought of them all.
It worked pretty well, let me tell you. Yeah. So anyway, you started studying the Church Fathers and getting into this, and you realized that the Catholic Church was the church.
Yes, but then there was another thing, because I was in Chicago, and I think it's a guy thing more, and I'm flipping the channels, and boom, there she is, Mother Angelica. And I go back, and I thought, that how many times has that story been repeated?
Right.
So there's Mother Angelica, and remember, I'm already predisposed to liking nuns a lot.
Yeah.
And then you can't take your eyes off her, So there she was.
I think you're worried about taking your eyes off her. You're going to get in trouble if you do.
I guess. But it was catechesis.
Yeah, right.
Because remember, we weren't hearing the gospel preached very clearly in many cases. We know the state of catechesis, what it was like in the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. It's why Mother Angelica really, even though this unbelievable faith, could start off with one camera and a headshot.
Right.
People were anxious to hear a homily.
Yeah.
And you got one.
Yep.
And so I started listening like I was always listening to. And then one night, this video comes on, and it's a
on EWTN.
On EWTN.
Yeah.
Circa in the 50s.
Yeah.
And once on a grainy, once on a barren hill. Mm-hmm. Story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So this is where I can really understand it's the same Blessed Mother, because it was Our Lady of Fatima that had gotten me to that point. And then to this day, it's Our Lady of Guadalupe. You could not separate Our Lady of Guadalupe from my own spiritual life.
Which is why you have the
I've
pin.
been wearing that for all those years.
Right.
You know, and I've probably been to the shrine in Mexico City 50 times.
Really?
Yeah. You mentioned Father Andrew.
Yeah.
We would bring pilgrimage. We've brought hundreds of people down there. I've organized pilgrimages there. It's really, I have a project right now, a Guadalupe project that I'm very interested in. And I think the Lord's moving me in that direction.
Wait. You're getting ahead of yourself.
Okay.
So what happened with Our Lady of Guadalupe?
Okay. I see Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the next day, I'm down on Michigan Avenue in the Daughters of St. Paul. And I purchase every book they have on Our Lady of Guadalupe. I was talking to the sisters. I was just at the Daughters of St. Paul here in St. Louis. And I said, if you went back and found a sales receipt, you'd see it. Because anyone ever bought 18 books on Our Lady of Guadalupe? And then on the back of one of them, it was Father Christopher Rangers, a wonderful Capuchin. God rest his soul, he passed away a few years ago. If you're interested, contact him. Mm-hmm. So I did. And very quickly went on a pilgrimage with him. And he was old school. He's a very saintly man. And so he introduced me to the shrine. And then he had told me he was on the board of something called the Queen of the Americas Guild, which was in Chicago. He was a successful Catholic businessman that started this. And the mission statement is spreading the knowledge of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I was living in Chicago. Mm-hmm. He was in St. Charles. So ended up being on the board there. I met him. Well, at this time then, right about that time, I realized two things were happening. Number one, the type of job I had, you didn't do a lot of deals a year. You did some big deals. And you may only do one a year, and it took 3 years to put it together, and then the next year. And it wasn't suited for a lot of people because there's a lot of pressure, but I never felt the pressure, and I always did the deals. Mm-hmm. It allowed you freedom of motion because I was reporting to one of the partners. I swear sometimes, and this is not an exaggeration, a couple months would go by and nobody knew where I was.
And they were fine with it.
They were fine because as long as I did the deal, Howard Ruby's a big thinker.
Yeah.
And I was in business development. He did, he didn't, who was going to ask? Everybody, I was reporting to him.
Right.
So I was spending time in Mexico City. Father brought me down there. In fact, this is a funny story. I was spending so much time in Mexico City, and it's still true to this day. Have you ever been to the shrine in Mexico City?
No.
That's part of the story, because it's funny how. But at any rate, it's not like a Lourdes or a Fatima or perhaps a Medjugorje in a sense. If you in Lourdes, for example, other than Paris, France, there are more hotel rooms in Lourdes than any other city. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you want to go, there's lots of places to stay. It's not like that in Mexico City. They were shooting the priest as recently as the 1920s.
Right. They
tried to blow up the shrine. There's no place to stay really that's around the shrine, so the city encroaches it. And right across the street, because I started to meet people there, there's a group of sisters that, these sisters took care of seniors. I had my own apartment there. I mean,
with the seniors?
With the seniors.
Oh, really?
And I don't speak a word of Spanish. It's another word where the good Lord has a sense of humor. So, I'd smile a lot at the sisters, and they'd smile back at me, and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I learned a lot about senior living because everybody in there was living to be 100. The sisters, the sisters were providing something that a developer or someone else can't. They were providing love.
Right.
So everybody was in the chapel. I remember they would be doing these exercises. They were belly laughing.
Oh, really?
People in their 90s, and some of the young folks that were involved in mission would come in, and it was a neat thing. Now, you took a cold shower. There wasn't any hot water.
Right.
But everybody was, it was an experience. But I was staying there so often, I looked out my window, and I would go over there, and I'm still employed. Mm-hmm. The deals got easier.
Really?
Yes. So I thought, you know, I thought, you know what, I'll just write the church a check. I was starting to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe God just wants me to stay here, you know. The least I tried, this stuff started to fall in my lap. And so I was talking about that, and then I don't know, I don't remember what the moment was. I don't know if there was a moment, but I thought, I just have to leave. I'm never going to get out. I'm going to start making too much money, and I'll write.
You had to leave the company.
I had to leave the company.
Right.
I did not know
Not
where
Mexico
I was going.
City.
No.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. But I was going back and forth. I had an apartment in LA, an apartment in Chicago. I just had to get out of the corporate world.
Right.
And
about when was this?
This would have been 27 years ago.
Okay.
27 years ago. And so I did. You know, I said, Howard, I'm leaving, and Howard everyone thought I was going through this midlife crisis, and it was the type of job they said, oh, you can come, you know, you can come back anytime you want, and I remember saying, because I had friends there, and everything, I liked the people that were there, and I said, I don't know where I'm going, but I can tell you, I know I am not coming back. I just knew it.
Yeah.
And even a year later, I would get calls, and they'd say, it's been a year, Al, when are you coming back? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, so-and-so got over there midlife. When are you going to get over this?
Right.
And anyway, so I didn't. Then Our Lady really began to take a hold of my life in a direction. In Mexico City, at the shrine, I met a group of successful Mexican Catholic businessmen that were producing animated videos on the lives of the saints. They were spending too much money, but these were beautiful. They're still beautiful, mm-hmm. these videos.
All in Spanish?
No, in fact, that's what they wanted. They were looking for someone to be sales
kind of an American
marketing
distributor?
in America.
Yeah.
They had a partner that was in America. But so I spent 6 years, the first 3 years as I think I head of sales, and then president the last 3 years. And I began to realize I suddenly had a product. It was a religious product. It was, you know, geared towards a 7-year-old, but it was a religious product.
Right.
I didn't know this world that I was used to the general market, Wall Street, Nordstrom.
Right.
I didn't realize that the evangelicals had a multi-billion-dollar vertically integrated set of activities. I remember thinking early on, you mentioned radio, because I was just trying to figure it out, and I thought, well, wait a minute, the evangelicals have 2,000 Christian radio stations.
Right.
And because of that, they have a vibrant Christian music industry. Mm-hmm. At the time, we Catholics had like 14 stations, and 7 were in a dorm somewhere in a college. So as a marketing guy, I thought, that can't be because Catholics don't like listening to the radio.
Right.
You know, there had to be a reason. How did we get so far behind? And there was and such. But so it was that learning experience. And then I was becoming more catechized, and the Lord started opening up different doors for me. That I began to meet people nationally and even internationally. I don't know why that is, but I began to be on different Catholic boards and over the years get to know bishops. Still do this Catholic Marketing Network, which is a connector between Catholic retail and the suppliers and publishers that produce the items for their outlets. But I've also been involved. Father Andrew was the postulator for the Fulton Sheen Foundation. Mm-hmm. And I met Father Andrew again at the Shrine in Mexico City.
Really?
I was organizing a conference there, mm-hmm. and we invited Father Grichel, and he said, can I bring a Father Andrew down? And of course he could. Well, Father Andrew and I became good friends immediately. So then we started to bring pilgrimages down there. And then years later, when the Sheen cause opened up, he was ordained by the late Fulton Sheen, and he was the first postulator.
Oh.
And because Fulton Sheen was a diocesan priest and bishop, we had to form a foundation. So he asked me to be the first executive director for the Fulton Sheen Foundation, and which I was, again, I thought, here's this man of letters. I know, I remember I took human resources in college.
Right, that's right.
I still get grammar right.
And you have a minor in accounting. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot, just like Louvain.
God's a funny
just
guy.
Just like his education.
Right. God's a funny guy, Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about the minor in accounting.
Yeah.
Which is terrible. I'm terrible at accounting, but I managed to get straight A's. You know what I did? I knew how to get straight A's.
Right, and that's all that mattered.
That's it.
Yeah, that was all that mattered.
I could tell, this is odd, I never missed class.
Yeah.
And I could tell, I would listen to what the teacher, and I could tell what was going to be on the test. And then I would cram all night long, get 100% on the test, and I'd forgotten everything.
Oh, you were a crammer. Oh, see,
I was just trying to figure it out. I wanted to get straight A's so I could get a job.
Right.
And to tell you the truth,
Not necessarily learn anything. You just wanted to get the job.
It's not like if you're becoming a doctor. You need to know the brain's up there, up there if you're going to do brain surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
And you weren't going to do brain surgery, so it really didn't matter. So anyway, you were the executive of the foundation for the Fulton Sheen cause.
Yes,
the promotion
we
of the Fulton
started
Sheen
it up.
cause.
We actually.
Did they make you move to Peoria?
No, that's what happened was that they weren't ready to. It's really fascinating because I remember sitting there when the cause opened up. So I really the Lord's allowed me to have so many experiences. So this was a new one. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, all right, so we're going to figure out if this man's in heaven. Mm-hmm. This is going to be interesting. And actually, as you go through the mechanics of it, to get through the paperwork, it is a miracle.
Yeah. They don't make it easy.
No. After seeing what goes on, I thought, oh, this is definitely, forget about the medical miracles.
Right.
They happen.
Right.
The real miracle is you actually get it through.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating. It was extremely fascinating. And then, because, Fulton Sheen was controversial, he spent some time up in Rochester that he wasn't really that happy about, and it was a trying time. Whether or not that was the thorn in his side that he talked about, I don't know. But that's one of the reasons, because Father Andrew was trying to get it opened up, and he was from El Paso, Illinois, and so he was ordained for the Peoria diocese.
Right.
And so it was a legitimate, and then Bishop Jenke was very, very positive on that, and so we opened the cause out of Peoria. And then what we did was we raised money for the cause. That's really
that was what the foundation did.
Yeah, it was funny because I was having breakfast with Bishop Jenke. I don't, again, this was new to me, right? So I'm having breakfast. I said, well, Your Excellency, so. I didn't say here's the bad news, but here's the bad news. I'm the executive director of your foundation, and he's a great bishop. He's a great man. And so, he's eating his eggs, and I swear he didn't even look up. I said, what would you like me to focus on? Raise money. So I thought, well, he's got me figured out. He gave me 2 words. He knew I would. Was it money raised? No, it was raise money.
Raise money. You didn't have him in the right order.
I had him in the right order.
Yeah.
And he said nothing else.
So you had your mission.
I had my mission. Yeah. Because, if you're a Franciscan, the Franciscan order pays for it, or, sisters, but he was a diocesan.
Right.
And Peoria, well, they really do, but they hadn't reached that particular point. So I don't know if it was 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 4 years are in there. And so we did that. We actually filed the paperwork and got everything going, was meeting with the postulator there. And Father Andrew, we weren't doing anything. Father Andrew was the postulator. Mm-hmm. So we were talking to Father Andrew every day about doing this or doing that. And then Peoria was ready to take it on. So we moved everything up there, and then it became much more normalized. And although, as you know, there's
controversy now
few years
going
later,
on.
there's some additional controversy.
Yeah.
So things like that, I was able to. I organized events for different bishops and even cardinals. I like doing events, and I found myself doing them. We did a couple of end-of-life events for Archbishop Gomez when he was in San Antonio. We did an addiction event with Cardinal Regali working with the Philadelphia medical establishment there, which is a wonderful group. Bishop Grauman had me working on a Pan-American event. That was Cardinal Nicholas Lopez Rodriguez was the president of that, and it had everything to do with Ecclesia in America, one church, one America. But it put me, we were doing events in Santo Domingo, Mexico City, and it was, again, Canada, United States, and South America. And it was really, it was a lay initiative, but it involved bishops and communications. Archbishop Foley, who was president of the Pontifical Council of Communications from Philadelphia, he would attend and was very supportive of it. So I began to be able to see the church from a lot of different angles, and it was a huge blessing, And I was able to figure out a way to support myself. It wasn't a road to riches, never has been, but it is. I would meet the most unbelievable people that were doing the most important work. And by this time, I was way past even the simple propaganda that is used to attack the church now. I mean, it's almost childish and ridiculous.
Yes.
So I knew, and again, this is not that the Catholic Church is all right. The Catholic Church has apologized, but there's never, ever been a force for good on this planet like the Holy Roman Catholic Church. That's just a fact.
Right.
You're going to tell me, no, it's the Republican Party or the Democrat? Come on. They've all come and gone, and they will come and go. There stands the church.
That's one of the reasons that I've had this discussion with evangelicals that, one of the reasons that you can believe that the Catholic Church is the true Church of Christ is because it's still around.
Absolutely.
For 2,000 years. And you look at history and all of these different regimes that came and went, and they 50 years, maybe 75,
yes.
Almost none of them 100 years.
Yes.
And they came and went, but the Catholic Church has continued
That's
all
right.
of these years, and it really shows no sign of fading away. So you saw sort of the business aspect
That's right.
of the Catholic Church, and you mentioned one of the things that I've done in my professional career as a lawyer was we represented a number of Protestant denominations, and I saw how really sophisticated they were in their fundraising,
yes.
in their communication, and yet the Catholic Church is way behind. I tried to set up a foundation for Catholic education 20 years ago, and it was basically shot down because it was going to be a national foundation, and the
yes.
bishops wanted it all to be, to keep in their diocese, and so
yes.
it didn't fit into the Catholic model.
Yes.
But you saw that in communication.
Yes.
What did you do?
Well, in many ways, and we're all going to be standing in front of the good Lord, so we like to, I like to say this, but I really think as I'm getting older, it's true. I quit having plans, if you will. And
God laughs at those, by the way.
Yeah, and I thought I don't really need those.
Yeah.
I stay very, very, very busy.
Right.
We had the incident coming down here because Marianne and I were talking because we have this event coming up, and I thought, wow, we need to find out who would do that. And I stopped and I thought, who's going to be there? And I thought, well, that's the person God wants. What if we would have had an accident right then? The Lord would have said, well, you want me to write you a letter?
Yeah.
So I said, let's all just really be on our toes here, because the Holy Spirit hasn't left the church.
No.
It's an extremely exciting time to be involved in the church. And what are our plans? I mean, again, but this is where he can use anybody, and I've seen this. So I really, people would ask me to do things. I've done a lot of volunteers. I'm sure you have a lot of pro bono things, and that's all okay. I guess I haven't suffered by doing that, and by saying yes, one door would open up another door. The business and ministry make very strange bedfellows.
Yes.
And we need to figure that out and do a better job with that. I often think Christ had to, when he had the parable of the coin and fishes, he had a call for a coin. I don't think he ever carried any money. They gave the thief, had the money bag.
Right. Judas, right.
So the question is, but in the same sense, we have to figure that out.
Now, have you heard the story about Mother Teresa? And I think it was Father Groeschel, when he was going to start the order in New York City. He was all stressed out about it. He said, what am I going to do? And he was over in India, in Calcutta, and he was one of the advisors to Mother. Yeah. And he said, Mother, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I've never done anything like this. And there's all this organization, and I've got to raise all this money. And Mother Teresa leaned over and said, oh, don't worry, Father. God's got plenty. Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks, Mother. Thank you.
It's very true.
It is. It's just, I send spreadsheets to God, and evidently He's on a different operating system.
I take a spiritual direction from Father Andrew.
Yes.
And I asked Father Andrew, and I've used this because I have a Mother Teresa where I said, I don't want to be testing God, but can I ask for signs? Because I really, discernment is hard.
Yes.
So we talked about that. So I asked for signs, and I get them. Now,
really?
Yeah. Here's an example. This happened maybe 18 years ago. We were producing these videos. I get a call from a Protestant publisher, and they said, he was senator. Senator Santorum's wife had written a book, and they're very Catholic. It's a wonderful family,
right?
And but they're praying the rosary. This is a Protestant publisher, and they love. If you ever met Rick and Karen Santorum, these are nice, really solid people.
Right.
So they had a hard time. So, and I'm from Pennsylvania. Rick went to Butler Catholic grade
really?
school. Yes,
oh, okay.
He did.
Okay. Yeah.
A few years later, but so we kind of had some. So I found myself up on Capitol Hill talking with Rick, and you couldn't help but be impressed with him and his young staff. And this is a guy that he understands being a Catholic in the public square. I mean, he would make one heck of a president. But at any rate, so I'm very impressed, and we were hitting it off personally. And so I left there, and I thought, I haven't never published a book. We're doing animated video. What do I know about publishing?
Right.
And I know distributing books is even more difficult than videos for the kids. So I went up and I had another meeting, and I thought, so then I talked to Father Andrew. I said, Father, I don't want to let, I met Karen, and the book was Letters to Gabriel.
Right.
Karen writes these letters, and then a drama enters because the child has a very serious ailment that the baby only lived a few days.
Right.
But she's writing these letters, very happy. I think she has done that with all her children. So it's Letters to Gabriel. And so I didn't want to let them down. Because I thought I can publish it, but what does that mean? I'm running this little company. The company really doesn't have any marketing dollars. He's a senator. And so, what you said, I knew that the CFRs knew Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa was coming to New York. So I said, Father, I'm going to publish the book if I can get a foreword by Mother Teresa. And he says, well, I don't know if I'm going to see her or not, and sometimes I pick her up. Father told me this story one time, a box with string would come out on the carousel. That was her luggage.
That was her luggage, right, right, yeah.
He says, I don't know if I'm going to see her or not. She's busy, she's a personality at that time. And I said, well, that's okay. Remember we talked about this sign, that's my sign. If I get well, I won't go through all the particulars, but guess that book has a foreword by Mother Teresa. We had Charlton Heston was at an endorsement. The thing just took off. And I've experienced that, where it's helpful because I would not have published that book. And I remember I had a personal letter from Mother Teresa to give to Karen. And I gave Karen, and Karen, of course, teared up, and then I immediately got off the hook because she says, I don't care if you sell a single book. I thought, that's good because I probably won't. She said this letter was...
We've got the same business plan.
No plan. You got the letter.
Yeah, you get the letter, and it's all up to God.
Yeah. But that happened. That's a true story.
Yeah.
I have had A lot of things like that happen. So you'd say, well, it hasn't been a road to riches. Really?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
different kind of riches.
Different kind of riches.
Yeah,
The real kind.
Well, let me ask, I want to take a few minutes here to talk about, and we're talking about the question about if Catholics are trying to, God's funny, he works in very strange ways. He picks he picks people that you wouldn't expect him
Every time.
to pick.
Every
Yes. Our Lady in Guadalupe, didn't go, to the Archbishop, went to this humble peasant.
He kept saying, send somebody else.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story of Gideon in the Bible when the angel
Exactly.
appeared to Gideon and said, "Are you sure? Now maybe we want to do that." That's kind of the way I relate to Gideon very well. But anyway, so there are all kinds of people out there who are inspired by God to do things, and they, let's say they publish a book. But like you said, it's very difficult once you get a book to get it into bookstores and that sort of thing. And part of the problem is all these bookstores it's not like it's a Borders. I'll mention them because they're out of business.
Yes.
But it's not like a Borders,
Yes.
where you sell it to one and then it gets in all these stores.
Yes, sir.
They're all individual stores. So how did you do that? And I understand that you've developed a network.
We have, but pretty much it has just been a reflection of the existing industry, if you will. But I've decided to try something, and there are certain things that we can do for the industry. You met Marianne earlier, and we're going to put together an author tour that I think we can really integrate with media, do some of the things that, and really help all of the stores. But I've had a concept, because when I looked at the industry, because the industry really hasn't changed that much, the Catholic trade in 25 years. You haven't developed chains.
Right.
There's some built-in inefficiencies there. It hasn't really changed that much. They struggle. Now these store owners, God bless them, people are going to heaven because of those stores. Just like I walked into a store and bought 15 books on Our Lady of Guadalupe. They have seen put a book in the hand and the Holy Spirit does the rest.
Right.
Many of those store owners not only don't pay themselves, they put money into the store to keep it up.
Right.
So people are going to heaven because of that. But that's not a business model, a long-term survival business model. The children aren't going to inherit that and want to do it. And
actually, I've had to deal with a family here in St. Louis that the father had been keeping the store alive, and when he died, the children looked around and said, "Oh my gosh, what kind of business model is this?" And they ended up selling to. There is a small chain here, but it was a family-run business, and it was an apostle of love for the father.
Most of the time,
there are a lot of stores out there like that. So how do you help them?
Well, again, it's not just particular to brick and mortar Catholic book and gift stores. You mentioned Borders. No more Borders. Family Christian, almost 300 stores declared bankruptcy. Last year they just worked their way out of bankruptcy. We're at a sea change in publishing through digitalization of media, of books, Amazon, of all these different things. So that's happening in the general market, in the Christian market, and in the Catholic market. So we're going to have to reinvent ourselves here, because to even call it a bookstore, I often say, if you're calling yourself a bookstore, call yourself a media center or something, or even to the publishers. You're not a publisher, you've got to be in media.
Right.
Publishing never was a great business usually. So and it's not going to get any better. So I think I had written an article 20 years ago, because again, I've never operated a store. But looking at the market, I thought, well, we are a church of form and substance. 10,000 years times 10,000 years from now, you will not be receiving the Blessed Sacrament virtually. It's not going to happen.
Right.
The sacraments, you're not going to be going to confession over the phone.
And you're not going to be baptized on the internet.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So what's going to be brick and mortar for sure? Catholic Church.
Right.
It's the only thing I would say for sure that won't go virtual. So that's where you put the outlets. Plus, If you take a look at the...
Wait, you put the outlets in the churches?
Yeah, here's what happened. Because as soon as I got involved in this, the stores would say, why can't we get more support from the pastor? That was a common thing you heard. And because at that time, I was already an active Catholic, I thought, well, I like to say that I deal with the world the way it is, not the way I want it to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the business part of me.
Right.
So I thought, that's never going to happen. The bishop, the priest is very busy. Plus, he's not going to get up on the homily. I mean, he could do certain things, and yes, but that wasn't going to be the solution. So I thought, well, they want, they either bring the flock there to the store, you bring the store to the flock. The fact of the matter is that only a small percentage of Catholics, if you take a look at the 70 million Catholics that are in the country, you tell me, Fred, but generally there's like 3 concentric circles, I would say. You have this outer circle, it's tens of million. We have infant baptism. Mm-hmm. Somebody joins the Marines, they might check Catholic because their mama told them they were baptized Catholic.
Right.
They don't hate the church, they don't love the church.
That's all, it's just kind of...
And maybe they go at Christmas or something.
Right.
In the middle, you have 3 million, about 3 million. We don't have empirical data, but that's pretty close. They would know who Scott Hahn is.
Right.
They would know who Mother Angelica is. They're consuming Catholic media. They're the customers, primarily, of these Catholic stores. That's important work, but I've always been more interested in this middle section. And in that middle section is tens of millions too. And those folks, remember, we know the state of catechesis. So if you were in front of, theoretically in front of that church, and remember, if the numbers are such that maybe only 5% are in that middle circle, the other percentage is this other group that has never set foot in the store, and asked who's going to heaven, you'd probably get 100% of them show up their hands. The only ones that wouldn't would be that 3 million, because they'd say, well, we were hopeful that we were going to get.
Right.
They understand the virtue of hope.
Right.
And what the church teaches. So they might not have their hands up.
Right.
Although they're going to Mass every day.
Right.
Everybody else is, what's the problem? We're going to heaven.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if they miss Mass on a Sunday.
Oh, that's okay.
No one's told them it isn't. It's not
right.
really their fault.
Right.
Fulton Sheen would say that. It's not really, it's not their fault.
Right.
But they're still connected. What amazes me is they're still connected. They're showing up. Now catechesis is getting much better. I mean, I belong to a unbelievably parish that you hear the gospel preached.
Right.
So it's definitely improving in a lot of different areas. But that group only comes together at that brick and mortar church. This is where when they say, well, Catholics voted this way, well, they're talking about those 2 outer circles. So
you're not talking about the inner circle.
No. But the two inner circles only come together at that brick and mortar church.
Right.
So if you're going to open up a brick and mortar, you're going to have to take a chance of who walks by. If it's 25% Catholic area, only 1 in 4 is even Catholic. And then where they are in that circle also has to be a factor. But it would be a pre-evangelization, I think, because those individuals, although they're all quite, I don't know if they're certain they're going to heaven, but pretty certain they're going to heaven, the priest hears the confessions.
Right.
So when he's looking at the crowd, everybody looks, everything. But the priest knows that half the guys are on porn. They know that people are having affairs. They know that there's drugs. There's real pain in this. There was a survey that came out today. Suicides are at a 30-year high.
Right.
That's not a society that's healthy and happy.
No.
So even though you may be going to heaven, there's a lot of pain out there. Well, Christ is the answer to all that. They don't know that. If you'd say, well, let me see a sign of hands that has some pain in their life, you'd also get 100%. I mean, mostly. Life throws curveballs at you.
Right.
Well, so this would be a situation where you would be able to, I don't like to call it a story, it's kind of a concept. And one of the things I want to try to do, and I don't know if this will happen or not, but I'm going to try to do that. And I have a group of people. We have a location that we're looking at, and it's like, You know, when you say, you know, generally you do have the Mother Angelica, great faith, and the laws of economics seem to be suspended. But generally, you have to do things the right way. If you're undercapitalized, that's how most business fail, and most Catholic entities are undercapitalized.
Right.
And even though they're doing the most important job, I've seen a lot of good things come and go because of a very small sum of money.
So if people are interested in finding out more about what they can do, how can they contact you? What should they do?
I would say, of course, go online. We're going to launch something in July.
Go online for?
VivaGuadalupe.org. We have .com too, but it's a nonprofit. It has to do with Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Okay.
I believe Our Lady of Guadalupe, it is a huge reservoir of graces.
Right.
And for some reason, that's been shown to me, and I didn't realize it was happening while it was happening.
But if people want to get in touch, they would go to
Viva Guadalupe.
VivaGuadalupe.com.
VIVA Guadalupe.com.org.
I had Alan Napleton here with the Catholic Marketing Network, and we've been discussing his faith story, his journey, and some of the very interesting, I have to say it was very interesting, stories about his life. Thank you again for listening, and God bless.